11 release managers. I think I remember that Iris wanted to be one of the release managers. Yeah. And last time we were talking about someone from Solo and if anyone else wanted to be. So Lynn, do you have an update on this?
Yes, Ryan King, we are working with him to submit hopefully his first PR to Istio soon. I think that's the only requirement, right, to be release manager?
Uh, I don't remember, but I think especially if he wants to shadow, whatever is the minimum bar, yeah, if it's one PR, that's good. I mean, go ahead, Mitch.
We also have a nomination from Intel, Steve Zhang. He's down in the notes from last week, or maybe it's this week. If you look below, I've got his email address.
This is ZHAN.
I think so, but you can, yeah.
All right, thanks, Mitch. So I'll just spend another minute on this. Do we need, I guess last time we were trying to figure out if we need someone more experienced who has done this before, probably someone from like Google or Red Hat. What do you think, Sven, Lynn, and Louis? I don't see Josh in here.
We definitely need somebody who has, a lot more experience because these two guys are new.
Yeah, is Ryan based in US zone?
Yes, he is.
Okay. All right, so I'm just gonna hear maybe Google IBM or Google Red Hat. Find a nominee, find an experienced. Okay.
Yeah, we can talk about it inside Google
All right.
and see if we can find someone.
Awesome, thanks. Docs for offline review, Istio with MCS service discovery. Nathan, do you have anything to discuss or should just take it offline?
Not a whole lot. It's already been through review in environments and networking. It's been approved there. So I'm actually already pretty close to the implementation there. Just one quick kind of note, we initially were kind of hoping that we would be able to drive all of our service discovery through MCS. In other words, Istio would no longer have to go to every individual cluster and just kind of like get endpoints and rather just use MCS to get all the endpoints it needed. Unfortunately, it's really not going to quite work out as well as we would have liked. So we've kind of like changed our approach a little bit, where MCS is really just serving as a more or less a filter on discoverability throughout the mesh. So we basically use service exports to determine whether or not a service is going to be effectively cluster local or mesh wide. So we just use MCS to kind of drive that decision. But the doc's there. It's been approved. If you haven't seen it, this is an FYI. It's out there. It's going to land pretty soon. So give it a look over and let me know if you have any comments.
All right. So Nathan, Nate, does that mean that we are going to be using service exports? That's the main decision, but we'll just rely on service exports?
So an MCS controller would be responsible for taking service export and turning it to service import and endpoint slice throughout the mesh. Istio is just using service export right now to drive that kind of like filter and service discovery that I was talking about. However, there would be a follow-on work to actually make Istio also be an MCS controller, such that like Kubernetes, like raw Kubernetes services would also be impacted because we would do the right thing in terms of generating imports and endpoint slice to configure Kubernetes as well. So we would basically be the control plane for all of Kubernetes in that sense. But that would be follow-on work.
I see. Got it. Hey, Costin, go ahead.
Yeah, for about service imports, I'm still completely confused what is their purpose and what they do, because normally in Istio we have the concept for import, where the user is declaring that, hey, I want to use this cluster, while in MCS it's automatically created, the user has no impact, it's just some object that is not clear what it does. Since we are watching service exports, if someone is creating service import, it doesn't matter because we already have the source of truth, the exports. So we probably need to provide some feedback and see how we can harmonize the concept of import from MCS and Istio, because that's going to confuse a lot of people. I'm still confused, and I heard the explanation many times.
To be honest, I kind of look at MCS as not really an API we want our users to deal with. I think Istio, we're going to want like a better discoverability policy in Istio and have them use that more abstract layer. And whether or not that means that we under the covers are generating MCS resources, that's fine. But basically just use a better API, because I think there are going to be a lot more cases in terms of how we want to tweak the discoverability of a service or its endpoints throughout the mesh.
Yeah. So what I'm going to suggest is, it looks like the first implementation, Nate, that you're doing does not have this controversy anyways. So all agreeing on that.
Yeah, that's right.
So let's table this for environments for discussion if the follow-up is needed or not. But for the first is other team members can look at the document or implementation and express their concerns if they have any. Is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
All right, awesome. Let's move on. John, you have your 1 minute thing. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, just a quick, while everyone is here, we have an issue with our tests. We don't know what it is, but basically almost all tests are failing at a much higher rate than they used to. We're looking into it, but just wanted to give some awareness about this. So if you see your test failing, it's possibly not your PR this time, and it's actually just a test flake. So.
Okay, that's good to know. So probably we have a long backlog of PRs now, which are sitting there and cannot be merged.
It's not too bad yet. We've been retesting a lot. It's maybe like 2 to 3% of tests randomly fail, so it's not that high, but high enough that you will have to retest your PR at least once, probably.
Okay, got it. Costin, is that an old hand or is that a newer? Yep. All right. Mitch, this is basically reopening and talking about the upgrade experience survey that you had, right?
Well,
You're on mute.
Neeraj, last time a lot of you didn't have time to chime in with questions. I think you requested to have this added so that we can reopen for discussions and questions for Mitch.
Yes, I totally forgot about it. Thank you, Lynn.
So the one follow-up that we discussed 2 weeks ago was that we'd like to announce support for skip version upgrades as long as testing is sufficient, and we're not calling them that anymore, but from 1.8 to 1.10, so the users can upgrade directly. So that was what we talked about 2 weeks ago. Sam and I have a blog that should be going out like tomorrow or the next day, so watch that for approval, explaining to users how to do a direct upgrade from 1.8 to 1.10. I think that was the only direct follow-up that we discussed 2 weeks ago. So if there's any other questions or any other follow-up, this is kind of the space for that.
So one question from me, Mitch. So is this going to be a norm that's going to be maintained? So with our support window of N-1, we are going to allow skip version or whatever the new name is, upgrades going forward, or this is just a one-off? I hope not.
No, this is not intended to be a one-off. The upgrade working group has done a ton to automate tests of this scenario. It is fairly limited, this release. We're giving them a specific way to do the upgrade. It's not supported across all of our upgrade mechanisms just yet. But our intent is to build on this as we move forward.
Got it. This is great. I think it's going to make life easier for a lot of our users.
Yeah, I think our users will be happy to see it. I think one thing that could make it a little bit better, this time, for you to do a direct upgrade from 1.8 to 1.10, those releases did not overlap in their support windows at all. So you have to leave the support window to take advantage of our upgrading once every 6 months. It would be great if users could upgrade once every 6 months while staying in the support window for their releases. Does that make sense?
I see. Yeah, it does. And do you know if there is any work or any activity going on to allow that?
So we did have a few proposals back in November around extending the Istio release cycle or support life cycle. We decided to defer those until time to deprecate 1.8 so that we could make a decision at the 1.8 end of lifetime. Unfortunately, that conversation got delayed and 1.8 is already gone end of life, but now would be the time to talk about it.
That's fair. Luis, when Lynn, oh wow. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I guess back when we discussed whether we would extend out, extend the support window a little bit, I guess the question was what version do we think would be a good base for doing that on, and whether there are any technical impediments. And that was kind of the question about 1.8. So we can have that conversation about 1.8. I know that the website's being updated to say that 1.8 is end of life. We could revoke that. So I guess the first question for the community here is 1.8 or 1.9 or 1.10 a good target or a better target for extending the support window? Are there any specific technical reasons why any one of those releases would be a bad option? And the number of hands are already up.
Yeah, and I guess another question, Louis, here is what is the debt or what is the extra toil if you do end up doing extension for one of these releases, right? So the three questions. Let's see who raised their hands. Costin and then John. So Costin, go ahead.
First.
No, I was just going to ask John if gateway injection is 1.9 because I think that's pretty much a good point. So that's my answer. Then 1.9 is the best point to start a long-term stable support. Because gateway injection is making a lot of upgrade scenarios and a lot of cross-version upgrades much easier and cleaner. So ideally, 1.9 should become kind of a long-term supported version.
Yeah, I was going to say, like there's not that much aside from what Costa mentioned on 1.8 versus 1.9. Not as much as previous versions, where we had like mixer H2D and whatnot. But how long we extend it for makes a big difference. Like if we extend it for 3 weeks to say, oh, we're giving you 3 weeks to upgrade and stay in the window, that actually means absolutely nothing because we already know when our next security release is going to be, and we know it's after 3 weeks. So that's kind of meaningless. If we extend it for a long time, then that probably means that we need to continue doing that, and we've gone to N-2, perhaps kind of accidentally. So I think it's hard to answer without knowing the extension window.
We also know that a lot of our users will wait until the .1 patch or .2 patch before upgrading to a new minor version. So that sort of lends support to what John is saying, that just a few weeks is not going to be a meaningful extension.
Having 3 releases is not a bad idea. I mean, 3 is a nice number. It's you have a stable release 1.9, you have a version 1.10 which is relatively stable, and then you have 1.11 which is the most is going to be a bit rough around the edges. So it's kind of a good compromise, I think.
And that also would match Kubernetes.
It will also match Kubernetes and GKE and a lot of other things.
What's the cost for the community or the dev team or the release and testing team who's going to do this work? Like, are we in a stable spot where we don't think other than patching security releases, most of the other things are automated that we can do this?
I don't think so. I spend a lot of time on backports. I mean, think about right now, if I want to make a fix, I have to go 3 releases, right? I go master 1.10, 1.9. It's going to be 1.8, so you have to do 4 times the work. And it's not just slapping the cherry pick label on there. It almost never backports cleanly.
I would add that Google is, doing a lot of backporting to 1.9, so it's a defensible release.
Yeah, as I understand it, most of our patches that are not supported in like say 1.8 right now, we have a vendor who's ending up doing the work, oftentimes in open source, so that they can provide support to their users. So this would just mean that instead of one vendor doing each patch, this would be more like a community-oriented activity.
So that's true for the security fixes. Are we just talking about security fixes in these extended releases, or are we also talking about critical bug fixes?
I would say critical bug fixes as well, with critical defined by TOC.
Sorry, say that again, Costin. You said
critical defined by
as?
TOC or release manager.
I
so
see.
basically in the high bar, not arbitrary things and not arbitrary features. But if we need to make some install changes to make it easy to do the cross revision upgrade, that's like the gateway injections. That's fair game, I think.
So you're suggesting security fixes and a limited support for critical bug fixes.
Critical bug fixes are meaning that I'll crash, Istio will crash, or meaning that we cannot safely upgrade from 1.9 to 1.11 or 1.12, whatever is going to be the newest.
Right. The trickiness is just how you would explain this to users, right? Versus just saying you're extending the support window.
Yeah.
I think explaining security patches is easier. The bug fixes becomes nefarious. It's like it's unclear how you will do this, right? You can sneak in some features also, and that might break more people than fix.
Yeah, and I would think gateway injection a feature instead of a bug fix.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's talking about pushing gateway injection in a patch.
Right. No. I think the question there was gateway is a good point at which we could pivot.
Yeah.
Because it's an impactful feature.
He introduced a concept that we should talk about as well, because he mentioned 1.9 being the first. I think you used the word long-term release. The question would be, do we want every release to be supported, say N-2, and then to John's point, we always have 4 concurrent branches that we're supporting as developers, or do we want to have some of our releases supported longer than others? That policy would require a bit more explaining, a little bit more detail for our users to understand it, but could mean that our users have to upgrade less often while we still only have those 4 branches to support.
I would vote for the second, where sorry, for the one like Ubuntu, where you have some releases designated as long term and some releases as normal. So 1.9 will be supported for previous. I mean, it's the simplest evolution from what we have right now. I mean, we have 1.4, which is a very, very long term supported, even if it's not supported, and then we have 1.9, and then we have 1.12 maybe. Or
so then what Costin is saying does become important, right? So if 1.9 becomes the next LTS, which there's 9 months or a year, then the user will go to 1.12, for example, and we support skip version upgrades. We'll have to put whatever we have to put in 1.9 to make that possible, right? That's what he was saying. You don't have to put in features, but you have to make that skip version upgrade possible.
And if we are happy, we can extend it to the second model where each version is long-term supported. But again, let's do gradual. I mean.
Okay. I go ahead.
Does that actually help with the burden?
We have a document about this. I'm dropping it in the chat. It's maybe not exactly what Costin is proposing, but it's pretty close, and we could massage it.
Right. So, let's say we offered LTS for 1.9, and it was 9 months. I don't think that actually helps with the support burden, right? Because we'd still do point releases. They'd be N-1. They'd fit within a 6-month window, and you'd have the LTS, right, for the 9-month window. And then you'd still have users who wanted to be on LTS being required to do a forced upgrade every 9 months, or 9 months minus a month.
Well, it's better than 3 months. So
Yeah, it's not
I-
3 months, right?
Right now, it's 3 months. If you want to stay
I
up to date,
understand.
right?
Yeah, I don't want to
If-
dismiss this discussion too much, but it seems like every month we have this conversation. It takes up the full meeting. Maybe if someone's interested, they could write a design doc and then we can discuss it.
or the TOC can just make a decision and we can go with it, not discuss it
Yeah.
again.
We do have a design
Well,
doc in the chat that was written back in November, and we said we would discuss in 6 months. Or I guess it's an RFC, not a design doc.
But the decision is basically we want to support more than 3 months. And we can discuss the details in the working group. But TOC needs to make a call that is not 3 months and the N+1 is out.
Louis, you were going to say something? You got interrupted.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about the backporting. What is the primary reason why we don't have, or why is it hard to automate the backporting?
Because we changed things, so it's not a clean backport.
Okay, so it's the code velocity is still a problem.
Yeah. If it's like, if you happen to get a file that hasn't changed in a while, you can just stick a label for backport 110, 19, 18, and then you're good to go. But
That's rare.
You hope so. So what my suggestion here would be, folks who are interested in this topic, work on this doc, add comments and add sections. Let's try to narrow this down by next TOC or one after that and see what we can do. I agree with Costin and both John that we have been talking about it for a while. It takes up a lot of time, and I'm going to stop that conversation now, but we'll have to bring it up again by doing some discussions.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's kind of a standing agenda item until we have a decision, but we can time box it. That's fine.
All right, I'll move ahead.
So then to close this out, are there any other comments on the upgrade survey? Any other questions that need answering, or can we move on?
I'm good with this. Thanks, Mitch.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So the next one is actually marked 20 minutes. So that's scary, but I'll let John talk about it.
yeah, I didn't want us to go too off the rails with this because I think we will if we don't have a cap. So we've added a new feature, which is gateway injection, which I think most Niraj, Lynn, and Sven have been actively discussing this. But for those who are not aware, it's basically doing the sidecar injection that we do, for sidecars, but with the gateway. And so what this gives us is the ability to more simply manage your gateways. So to update them, you can just do a rolling restart like a normal sidecar. And we've also fixed some limitations around topologies, so you can now easily use gateways in different namespaces or with external Istio and not worry about having to try to synchronize the mesh config across all these different clusters and namespaces, which doesn't really work so well. So there's we started out with this promotion doc. We would like to get it to alpha, ideally in 110 as kind of like a backport support version, because all the functionality is already there. But I mean, whatever we need to do is fine, I suppose. And that kind of led us to adding more documentation for the feature. And in the documentation, we had a bit of controversy on how exactly we want to position this to users. And so part of the discussion is, now there's kind of quite a few different ways to deploy gateways. You can use Helm, Istio Cuddle, plain YAML, and injection or not injection. And we really don't want to give people 6 choices to make when they're first installing Istio, because that is way too much burden on the user. And most of them don't care. So in the PR, which I should have linked here. Oh, I did link there. Okay. We kind of recommended using the plain YAML approach because it offers the most flexibility in terms of upgrades, and it uses just plain, Kubernetes service and deployment versus Helm and Istio Cuddle. But there was some discussion about whether that was a good idea or not, and someone suggested we bring it up to the TOC. So here I am. I think that's kind of a high-level summary, but feel free to ask if there's anything else I should explain.
So John, maybe you want to explain how the new Kubernetes Gateway API is supposed to work in the same context.
Yeah, so the new Kubernetes Gateway API, I do not currently have any plans to make it change the deployment of the gateways at all. So the API will configure the gateways as is today, but the actual deployment of the service and deployment and HPA and whatever is kind of orthogonal in the current state. There has been some discussion about making the gateway API actually provision the deployment and service, but I'm a bit skeptical of it and haven't looked into it too much.
That is what we expect most other implementers of that API to do, though, right?
Maybe it's hard to say right now.
They will have the same problems we have, basically. Meaning that,
Exactly.
it's very difficult to. I mean, they lack ability to if they're running in cluster, to specify, request CPU and all the other stuff.
Right. That is why they have gateway class, and that has not been fleshed out.
Yep.
Yeah, I would say I'm very wary of copying what other people are doing right now, because all of the other implementers currently do not have the demands of users that we have. So they just haven't solved the upgrade issues that we have, because I don't know why. But, yeah.
But long term, I think it's clear that we'll probably have some form of automatic controller. Yes.
So I think that topic for this PR, I don't think it matters that much, right? When the support and the maturity comes for gateway classes, we can discuss again whether we want to have a controller for it or not, right? Is that fair to say?
Yes, although that's not that far out, Niraj.
But
Really, okay.
I personally think I don't think we should ever do it. So I don't know. Unless you push me for it, Louis, then it may be further out.
Let me put it in a different words. Even if we do it, we still want to support users deploying their gateways however they see fit. I mean,
Absolutely.
It's never going to go away. So this mode will stay for a long time.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with you. And I think then so Louis, do you want to continue on this path, or can we move towards asking or resolving some of the questions and concerns? Yes.
No, I certainly agree that we need to give users control over the ergonomics of the deployment. So I'm not arguing against what John is saying. At least not yet.
Yet. Yeah.
Is this just asking about the default mode? Like, is that the crux of it?
What we recommend?
Kind of. I don't understand this simple YAML and why do we need it? Just being honest.
Raj, it means that if I'm a developer and I want to deploy a gateway in my own namespace or wherever I want, I have my gateway object, I have my service object that I create, and I can put whatever load balancer, whatever setting I want as a service object using Kubernetes documentation. And then I just need to put a small deployment to create the actual workload that is going to be the gateway. So it means that it's not us, Istio, that is maintaining the gateway or deployments. It's a user doing consistently when they have kind of a chart that does its own stuff. It has its configuration.
But are we going to do anything to stop that from happening? I mean, it looks like they can do whatever they want anyway.
They can do whatever they want, but we also want to recommend them that they do whatever they want, because they know what they're doing probably.
Yeah, so the whole point here is that, yes, we can expose a Helm chart, and what happened and will continue to happen with the Helm chart is that folks will ask for every single field in the Kubernetes API, which includes service deployment and everything else, to be exposed. Not just most of them, practically every single one. And what ends up happening is our values.yaml becomes this mess of an API that's not consistent, it's not documented, and it's not very well usable. So for example, if I want to add a port to the service, I need to go figure out how we map that into some random API field. I don't know how to do that today. I'd have to look, and it's not documented, so I'd probably have to look directly at the Helm chart. With this model, I have a service, and I know how to add a port to a service because I'm familiar with Kubernetes, so I can just add it in there. The same goes for any field in the deployment, whether it's some security context field or like some really obscure field, like, I don't know, some DNS configure something. You don't have to go figure out how we decide to expose it in the Helm chart, or if we did. You just use, standard Kubernetes APIs.
So John, that's true also for Istio operator, right? So we created an API layer on top of the Kubernetes specification. So users have to look at the documentation, right?
Yeah.
And I think that was intentional. The choice was intentional, right?
I think the problem is that if you want to expose a very small opinionated layer on top of Kubernetes, then maybe a custom resource on top of it makes sense. But that's not what we want to do. Our users demand to set almost every single field in these APIs. And so we cannot possibly make a better API that offers all of the configuration of service and deployment than service and deployment already, right? Like, there's no better API for those to extend every field than the existing one.
But I agree with you partially. The issue here is that goes beyond gateways, right? Most of the Istio artifacts are just deployments in services.
The difference is that with Istio-D, we are shipping the Istio-D application, and like the user doesn't really need to care what ports are on Istio-D, right? There's like 5 ports, and they're kind of implementation details. With the gateway, it is their own application. It may be Envoy, it may be configured by Istio-D, but it's effectively theirs. And they choose what ports are open. They choose what labels are on it. They choose everything, and it's a user application, despite the fact that it's running our image.
Let me give you an example. If you create a gateway, we are telling people in their charts or installs, they put virtual services, gateways, and everything else. If they want to add the port 5000 in their gateway object, normally you would expect that they just put the port 5000 and everything works. But that's not true, because they need to go back and reinstall Istio with an extra option to have the port 5000 exposed in the service, because now it was split. So you have the service in one chart and you have the gateway in the user chart. So in the new world, everything will be in the user chart. So if they want to use port 5000, they add it in their chart, deploy their chart, and they're done.
Yeah, I think the key difference is, you don't have to learn Istio API. People already know Kubernetes, and they know how to add that additional port. So they can just figure it out themselves without looking at documentation. The other important thing I want to highlight with the simple YAML is, today, if you upgrade your gateway, you literally have to download the latest Istio kernel and then run the upgrade command to upgrade your gateway. So you have to be very precise on exactly what version you are using on your Istio kernel. With the simple YAML, you could just restart your gateway, and then the newer version of the proxy and its configuration, it's going to automatically re-inject it for you. So the upgrade of the gateway is really how users are upgrading their normal workloads today. And I think that's really helpful for users to upgrade the gateway.
Yeah, I get your point. I think the key here is whether do we want to consider gateways as part of the normal application workflow, or is it part of something specially crafted by Istio?
I mean, they are part of the data plane, so users are putting them, normally think them through as the normal workloads, except maybe they have their own namespace, maybe they put on specific like edge nodes, but they are part of the data plane.
Yeah, as part of this document, Niraj, if you scroll down a bit, there's a kind of deployment topology as well, and we're trying to move people from thinking of gateway as this like one like monolith Istio Ingress gateway. It has to have that name, has to be an Istio system, to being a bit more flexible. You can have multiple gateways in different namespaces, and they're kind of your own application to run. So like, I agree that yes, a lot of people probably think of it that way today, but I don't think that's the way we want people to think of them.
I don't know if that's totally correct. Just because I think different organizations have different thresholds for who can configure what. But I will let others also speak on this topic. Sven also had concerns, and I think Louis was also trying to speak in between.
I think my concerns were more about just what we tell the user as the default, not necessarily whether we support the simple YAML or not. Because I agree with everything that John and Costin are saying. I think we need it for the users that have that. It's just, what do we want to tell people is the simplest possible way to set up gateways? That was my main concern. So I don't know, John, if you have a feeling about that one.
Yeah, I mean, my personal preference is the simple YAML, but I am slightly concerned that it is kind of the newer one, like Istio, Cuddle, and Helm are already present. And so I would be fine with us doing another one as long as we do have one as the recommended option, because I don't want users to come to this page and be like, there's 3 options, I don't care, I just want to do one of them. So I think that's the hardest question Istio today.
In the Helm and Istio operator ones, is it are those just a layer on top of the simple YAML, in that once it's used, the simple YAML exists and then we still use injection, or are those not using injection?
It's a bit of a mix. So there's kind of 2 parts. There's things that are injected, which is the minimum set of things that you need to install a gateway. So it, all the internal environment variables, readiness probes, that sort of thing. And then there's things that are completely optional, like you can configure your own security context, your own resources, CPU, memory, whatever. Those things we already have an API to configure them in Helm. And so if you install with Helm or Istio Cuddle, they'll have the same output with those. They're using the same charts. You would basically get a deployment that has the resources, the security context, all the optional fields as part of the deployment. And then when the pod spin up, the required fields, which includes the image, most importantly, because that's changing, are injected. With the simple YAML, all the optional fields are up to you entirely. So you have basically a bare bones minimum deployment to get, that you even can use with Kubernetes. And then we inject just the bare bones minimal stuff to run a gateway. And so all of the resources, security, context, et cetera, are left up to you instead. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I was more wondering if there's, are there big downsides to using the Helm or Istio Cuddle version?
Yeah, I would say, so one actual upside of the Helm and Istio Cuddle is that when you do install it, you get basically what you get today. You get the full thing where we've already configured some sane resources. We've already configured HPA and pod disruption budget. And you kind of get this all-included package. It just also happens to be using injection, which makes upgrades a bit easier. With the simple one, you have more control, but you don't necessarily have all those things. So if you want them, which you may not care, you'll need to configure them yourself. The biggest benefit of the simple one is that the deployment and the service are not necessarily coupled. And so if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there's an example of an upgrade method. Where you basically would spin up another deployment and you could slowly shift traffic over by scaling up or down that deployment. So this kind of depends on the simple YAML because we need to preserve the same service, but you have 2 different deployments. And so if you have the service and the deployment coupled together, like in Istio Cuddle and Helm, it's quite challenging to do this. And to answer Rob's question, is there a reason we don't use rolling upgrades for the deployments? We do. So there's 2 recommended upgrade paths. One is just that. You just do a rolling restart on the deployment. And the other one is this. The issue with the rolling restart, which is probably fine for a large number of users, but that you don't have as much control. So if the pod spins up, then the other pods will spin down and Kubernetes will keep doing that repeatedly. With this case, you can pause that though, check the traffic, right? And you can pause.
So rolling upgrade, you can pause.
That's news to me.
Yep, you can pause it in the middle, and if you have enough replicas, then it kind of gives you that control where 1 is the new one, 5 are the old ones, and you have paused the rollout.
But we have a whole API in Istio to support version-based upgrades. traffic shifting and all this stuff. I mean, it's both traffic shifting and in-place upgrades are fine. It's not.
We also are hearing that most of our users don't want to use that at the moment.
I have a question about this. Are we saying that the versions that we support, all the APIs we support in terms of version-based upgrade and traffic shifting are not used? Because that will simplify a lot of our code if we don't have to support this kind of. I mean, it's a core feature in networking. If we get feedback from the users that they don't like to do version shifting and for their own application.
Hang on, Costin. I don't think that's being said. Mitch was trying to say that the canary or revision-based control plane is not extensively used. And I don't want to segue to that topic just yet. Let's iron this one out if we can, right? So,
I want to clarify, users do not have to do this canary upgrade, right? This is only users that want a very safe, controlled rollout. The other upgrade path of in-place upgrade is not like the in-place upgrade of previous non-injected versions. Like, it's still fairly safe. Especially now that I know you can pause a rollout. I had no idea you could do that. That's pretty cool. It's just slightly less control because and harder to roll back, etc.
I mean, there is another version of this, right? You can stamp out your own ingress gateway service also, and then play the DNS tricks to do some testing and canary rollout, right?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. So from my side of things, at least the way I'm looking at it, we can keep the three options here. I see the value in the simpler approach, but again, from my experience, when I have seen most of the people need some templating for these kind of things. In fact, many of the customers that I deal with, they even have to have a templating on top of Helm because they have different environments that they roll these things out for testing. So some of our users will not use the direct YAML approach, but I can totally see some other users might. For the recommended approach, I just don't think something that we just added should just become the recommended approach.
So what if we make Istio Cuddle the recommended approach because it's also the recommended approach for installing the control plane, and if we get feedback that people like the simple YAML, then we can revisit in the future.
That sounds like a reasonable approach to me. Others? Okay.
Yeah.
That's
Well, I have some concern with, again, the API used by operator is more or less more frequently getting out of date with the rest of the stuff, and it's we are trying to have gateways move to different namespaces. We are trying to do a lot of things to improve the operations of Istio, and that's not very friendly for operator.
So I guess the decision that Neeraj was questioning is more about for 110, right? So for 110, simple YAML is so new. I mean, it doesn't make sense to be recommended as preferred when something is experimental alpha, while the Istio operator is probably at least beta. I mean, we can reevaluate in the future if customer comes to tell us, they really love simple YAML, but for the time being at the moment, certainly Istio operator is probably more mature.
I agree. And to be honest, Costin, if you come back with a list of GitHub issues or Slack conversations or discuss posts which says, we wanted to do this, and the operator API or Helm didn't support it for gateways, that will basically strengthen your argument.
How about for 110, if the concern is safety, we just keep the current install that has worked for a long time without injection. And in parallel, we provide maybe a simplified Helm chart that is just doing the injection. And people will have the choice to use either the new one, especially if they install a new namespace, or keep the existing stable one. So it's kind of a best of both worlds instead of trying to combine them.
That is kind of what we did. We have a Helm chart with injection and non-injection.
Well, I don't think we have the Helm chart where we enable injection as an option, but we also have the 100 options. I'm saying just a clean chart separated from the other one. So it's Helm, it's injection based, it has a clean API, and it's completely separate. I mean, it's not even.
Yeah, that's the plain YAML with another name, I think.
It is, but then it's a Helm-based install, so it's consistent. We support Helm and we support Istio Cuddle. The Helm will be the simple Helm because we can support the API,
Then you need to actually make things consistent across those two charts.
That's a problem we have for everything. I mean, actually, we don't have to. It's a new chart, new API. It's not. We don't have to make it consistent. That's a new chart where we tell people, hey, you install this chart in your own namespace. You follow best practices. We don't have to support all the mounted secrets, everything, but it can default to SDS.
Go ahead, Louis.
Everyone is happy. Everyone is happy. I mean, people can use the old chart for if they want to have all the options, or if they want something super simple, they use the new one.
So I don't think we should try to decide creating a new Helm chart in this meeting without an actual proposal. We have had lots of issues when we try to change things at the infrastructure level, and people are suddenly surprised by it. But I do think we can decide right now, saying of three, which is the recommended approach for 110 and 111, and then based on feedback, we can go towards Costin's approach also. But Costin, I just don't think in 5-10 minute discussion we should say let's just create a new chart.
I think there's certainly a merit to Costin's proposal, right? If there's no difference between simple YAML and simple YAML, and we just call it Helm, right? Then at least we're not introducing a new concept, even if we're literally doing the same thing.
It's maintenance, though, right? For a simple YAML, we actually have zero maintenance.
We do have tests for both Helm and Istio install. I mean, that's already there. So when you do the test with Helm, you'll install Istio with Helm, install the new simplified Helm chart. If you install with the Istio you use Istio.
I don't understand how it could work, because the entire point of the simple YAML is that you directly modify the Kubernetes API. If we put it in a Helm, then we either have to, one, there's no configuration, and then that's useless because we want people to configure it. Or two, we add our own API on top of Helm, at which point we'll slowly work our way back to the current one, and it will be painful and be very confusing for users. So I don't see how it makes sense.
Don't forget that people don't use Helms always as they are, but sometimes they just fork it. They take the Helm and they modify it. So a user can take our Helm chart and modify it for its own purpose. I mean, customize it in place.
Then there's no point in using Helm if they do that. They could just copy the YAMLs.
That's true, but some people use. I mean, we support Helm. We don't support plain YAMLs right now in Istio. We support Helm and Istio Cutter. Sure,
some people some people are using Helm in their CI/CD systems, right? So they want to have everything on top.
Yep.
There's still value there.
Yeah. I'm still struggling to see why a new Helm chart will be beneficial here. Sorry, I get your point, but I'm not convinced.
I explained in the chat, the problem with moving Helm to beta, we discussed in previous environments, is that the API surplus is horrible and it cannot be supported here as a beta API. In particular in Ingress, I mean, there are 2,000 options for the Ingress chart, and most of them don't make sense and are deprecated. But this way, we can have a defensible APIs that we can support long term.
Right, which is, I mean, that's also saying the same for operator, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Which is worrying to me. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, we are deprecating our we are deprecating our beta installation methods, which doesn't sound right.
Well, I don't think the operator API is beta or follows a beta in the sense that that all the APIs will be supported for as long as beta requires and everything else. Some of them don't even exist anymore. So
Okay, so can I suggest one small thing here? Is that I think directionally, do we want to move towards a world where Istio controls the least amount of things directly?
Oh yes.
And yes, I think so as well. And if that's the case, then we should start working on, or we should continue working on this kind of thread without necessarily thinking about, right, exactly for power users, without thinking about what's for 110 necessarily or 111. And then at some point when it actually matures, we can talk about the switch.
Right, exactly. We need more feedback, basically, on simple.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. I mean, previously, at least, our feedback was when we started with Istio, Helm and kubectl were the only options, right? And it was too complicated to manage the dependencies. So we came up with the Istio-CTL based approach where it's more guided. Maybe now we have simplified our things so much that just YAML will work across the spectrum. I don't know, but we need feedback, like Ian said. All right, so is that fair enough? Can we give our decision to John and move on? All right, so John, what do you need? So 110, I know we're not talking about just specific releases, but we have to so that you can actually submit your PRs and close. So I'm going to say 110, we provide simple YAML, but supported version is Istio-CTL. Is that what most of
I would
us
say
agree with?
recommended version, not supported. Is that
Absolutely.
okay? And then are we good for promoting to alpha? Barring the actual docs and stuff, the level details. We can discuss on the enhancements issue as well. If we...
One suggestion.
Yeah.
Sorry, to promote to alpha or even to beta the concept of custom injection, because that's really what the feature does. It allows you to specify a custom template for injecting. John, does it make sense?
Yeah, we could change the feature to be a higher level if that makes sense.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's a great point, Constant, you raised, because I'm looking at the Istio operator and the Helm tab now. Basically, we're still using gateway injection, and we're still simplify users' experience of upgrading gateway, that they could just restart the deployments to pick up the new version of the gateway image and the config, right?
There's also nothing prevent. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, we just have someone's hands raised. Tong Lee, do you mind asking? Apparently not. Louis, go ahead.
And just to be clear, there's nothing preventing a user from creating their own Helm chart, right? From the simple YAML. That's separate.
Right.
Or the other way around. Right. You can always take the Helm charts, add whatever options you want, and make it more customizable.
Not the current Helm chart for Ingress. That one is
no. They shouldn't they shouldn't copy it, right?
Right, it would be Helm based on the simple YAML that gives them the maximum flexibility they need, right? And they don't need to care about what is your API to expose this configuration.
Right. So maybe the docs should say something like, if you use Helm, if you want to use Helm to manage these deployments, just create your own Helm chart out of simple YAML. Presumably, we're going to give people the sample YAML, right, that they could use. Right, a very simplistic gateway deployment.
So the problem with that is we have like environment variables and stuff like that. So
no,
saying this
we inject
sample
those,
is canonical.
The sample is pre-injection under.
Oh, okay.
Right, John, that works. Right, we can have in the docs an example of the sample YAML, and then just under it say, if you want to use Helm with this, just go create your own Helm chart out of it.
I think that's the best option, and we can put it in samples directory so it's clear that it's a sample, and we are free to use best practices, and again, that will be a sample of how to use gateway in the recommended.
Okay. So I think that satisfies the Helm user need reasonably.
Yeah.
Tong, do you want to go ahead?
Hey,
Yeah, go ahead,
Can you hear
Tom.
me?
Yeah.
Okay.
can.
I don't know what's going on. Okay. So, couple point here. I know John has been using this simple YAML for at least 2 discussions I participated. I just feel like when you say simple YAML, do you imply that there is a complex YAML or something else? So, I mean, if we can we just say YAML instead of a simple YAML? That's point one I'm trying to make. Second is that if we do suggest that we do recommend use operator, should we have that tab being the first one instead of YAML being the first one? Also, I want to add that when I first started using Istio, I was looking for a YAML file similar to, let's say, if you want to install inject ingress controller. They provide a huge YAML file. You don't even look at that content. You say, okay, great. I'm going to use kubectl, apply that YAML file. Great. I see my stuff up running in Kubernetes. I'm done with it, right? I don't even care what's inside the YAML file because I know this installs injects ingress controller. When I look at the Istio first, I was looking for something like that. I couldn't. Then I find, okay, you actually have to download Istio, where you have to do Helm chart. I was really, really surprised that you have to set yourself up first, then you can have your Istio running. So I like where we're moving to, just use a YAML file. And if that's a direction, I think we should be having this capability. But if we say we're going to continue just use operator and use Helm chart, all that stuff. But in addition, we're going to just do YAML as well. Now you're introduce a new breed of installation method. That can cause more confusions. It's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Yeah, no, really valid points, Tong. I think on the first 2 issues around whether it's a simple YAML versus complex YAML and whether we should just call it YAML, I will let John pitch in on that.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I'll think of a better name and definitely reorder the tabs.
Yeah, and reorder the tabs. Yeah, and I do agree. I mean, people who are used to installing Nginx Ingress, I mean, they might have found Istio Ingress Gateway a bit more Herculean. So I guess we are moving in the right direction. Thanks for the feedback, and John and Costin for implementing this feature.
Yeah, definitely move to the right direction. Honestly, I think users going to like simple YAML or whatever name we call it better down the road. Yeah. We just need a little bit time for user to transition and mature.
All right. I think we have an agreement here. Is this decision good for everyone? If so, we will move on. Or actually, we will end the meeting. We're 4 minutes over. Swen, Lin, Louis, all good?
Yeah, it's good. At some point, I would like to revisit the fully operated version, and I understand. Right, there's obviously a cliff between customizable and not customizable at that point. But yeah, I think what we've described here is reasonable for the immediate releases.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That sounds good.
Anything else?
I was going to, I was just saying, John, definitely work with me on the documentation because I want to also understand how does user customize gateway image with simple YAML.
Yeah, sounds good. For what it's worth, it's the image field on the deployment.
Awesome. And I think John, Yeah, you have a lot of comments outstanding from my review also, or maybe you answered them and I haven't. So let's close that loop so you can make progress.
Yeah, I know. I'll go update it today, and I'll comment on there when I've done it. So,
All right,
thanks everyone
awesome.
for the feedback.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we'll meet next week. See you.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Yep.
Bye.